Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Janmadyasya yato anvayaditaratascha artheshu abhigyaswarat Tene brahmahridaya adikavaye muhyanti yatsurayah Tejo varimridam yatha vinimayo yatra trisargo mrisha Dhamna swena sada nirastakuhakam satyam param dhimahi Nigamakalpataror galitam phalam shukamukad amritadrava sanyutam pibata bhagavatam rasamalayam muhuraho rasika bhuvi bhavukaha. So now we enter the fourth chapter of the seventh Skandha of Srimad Bhagavatam. We are in the middle of the story of Hiranyakashipu. We saw how Hiranyakashipu did intense tapas, austerities, and he asked for a very clever boon. Again, the boon he asked of Brahma was, let there be no fear of death from any being created by you. Let there be no fear of death indoor or outdoor, day or night, from any weapon on earth or in air, from men or from animals, from gods, demons, or serpents. So, in this way, he thought he covered all the bases, and thereby, even though he was told he cannot ask for immortality, he thought he pretty much will get it by asking in this way with his intelligence. And now Narada continues and says that Brahma had to confer upon him the boon because he told him that he would grant any boon other than immortality. So, since he asked for this, he was given this boon. Brahma said, this is an extremely rare boon to attain, but I give it to you. So, this again shows how Hiranyakashipu represents this manipulative intelligence of the materialistic men who think they can arrange matter in such a way, and they always work toward making the body immortal in some form or the other. And that's what Hiranyakashipu did exactly. And having attained this boon, he thought he was invincible, and therefore he, having acquired this boon, became very powerful. His form became so strong. He was golden, as we saw already. His form became golden, and he was having so much physical strength, mental power, and he had such a army with him, and he now was invincible. So he subjugated all the quarters, all the three worlds, and it is said that all the beings, the not just humans but the various celestial beings such as Gandharvas, Siddhas, Rishis, and all those were subjugated by him. Everybody was conquered. He had taken over the whole universe. And it is said he established himself not only on earth but also in heaven. Because as we know, heaven is the abode of Indra, which is also a temporary place, albeit long lasting compared to earth and full of pleasures. So it is said that he even removed Indra from heaven and he conquered heaven. He was able to therefore take residence in the mighty palace of Indra, built by Vishwakarma, who is considered the architect of the Devas. So he was the owner, the proprietor of not just earthly riches but also heavenly riches, and he had under his control the entire heavenly abode, it is said. All the great workmanship of the wonderful palaces and the precious stones and the women, everything was in his control, and he was reveling there, and he was tended to by not just men, but it is said that even the demigods had to serve his feet. That is how arrogant and proud and powerful he became. And yet he was completely inebriate. He was always under the influence of wine. His eyes were red because of intoxication. So he was full of power, full of um, strength, and also full of intoxication out of his power, both literally and figuratively. He was literally smelling of wine. And yet, the unfortunate situation was those who were yogis and rishis who were situated in tapas and yoga, they were made to serve him. So it is said that he had such unsurpassed uh, sovereignty over the whole world that every created being had to serve him. So this was his situation. It is said all of the earth's resources, all the oceans, rivers, mountains, the valleys, the trees, everything that was produced anywhere was all enjoyed by him. So in this way, Hiranyakashipu was able to become the invincible enjoyer far more than any billionaire of today by having such unrivaled sovereignty over all pleasures of the world. And in this way, a lot of time slipped, and he was drunk with power as well as with wine, literally. And he violated all the injunctions. He did not have any control over his senses. It is said that even though he had all the objects one could crave for, he was not satisfied. This is again the quality of demoniac people, that one can never get his desire satisfied by going after satisfying the desires themselves, because the more the desires are satisfied, the more the desire grows bigger. The example given by Manu is that trying to satisfy desires by indulging them is like pouring ghee, clarified butter, into fire to quench the fire. The fire only grows bigger. So that's what happens to Hiranyakashipu and demons like him. And therefore, he was violating all the scriptural injunctions with his uncontrolled mind and senses. And seeing all this, all the demigods, of course, were completely powerless. And so they turned to the only source they can turn to, which is the Supreme Being. So they offered a prayer from the depth of their heart, and they said salutation to be the Supreme Being Hari, the Universal Spirit, attaining whom nobody returns again to the material plane. It's a beautiful prayer. They say, Tasyai namostu kasthayai yan atma harir ishvaraha yadgatvana nivartante shanta sanyasino amalaha. This expression, yadgatvana nivartante, is an expression found in Bhagavad Gita too. Krishna says, yadgatvana nivartante tadhama paramam mama. The eternal abode, reaching which one does not fall back into material nature, is the eternal abode of the Supreme Being, pure consciousness, Satchit Ananda. So the Devas, the demigods, pray that, O Lord, the abode of eternality, which is untouched by material nature, please protect us. And having heard this prayer, the Supreme Lord, Hrishikesha, it's another beautiful name for Krishna or Vishnu, Hrishikesha's voice alone was heard, deep as the rumbling of clouds. Always that's the voice that is heard of the Supreme Being, like a cloud rumbling, though there was no form seen. And the voice said, do not be afraid, O Devatas, you will be protected. No doubt, having seen me or having heard my voice, what is very conducive to your well-being will be attained soon. The wild demon, his wickedness is well known to me, and I shall put an end to it. Rest assured that when one develops hate in the heart towards demigods, towards scriptures, towards cows, towards brahmanas, and towards all good beings, and ultimately towards myself, his destruction is assured. So this is what we see many demoniac people even today, who deny any sense of religiosity, any sense of piousness, any sense of dharma, and they think there is only once to live and therefore one should maximize enjoyment. This is the attitude of demons, and that's what here Bhagavan says. Such attitude which disrespects scriptures, disrespects sages, will assure destruction. And so finally he says, when this demon will have a son Prahlada, and he will proceed to harm his own son, who is going to be a wonderful and calm son, at that moment I shall slay him. So this is the boon the Supreme Being awards these devas, and hearing this, they are all very satisfied and they go back. Meanwhile, Hiranyakashipu has 4 sons, it is said. This was already mentioned in the chapter on Diti, and Prahlada being one of them, and he is the most preeminent son. He grew up completely different from Hiranyakashipu, and the reason for that will be seen later. It's very surprising, because being born to a demon, Hiranyakashipu being a vile demon as we saw, Prahlada turns out to be the most exalted soul, preeminent in all way, very rich in his wisdom, very amiable, senses under control, friend of all, greatest well-wisher of all beings. It is said he bowed low like a servant to all the great beings. He was kind to the poor like a father, affectionate to his equals like a brother. He looked upon the elders as God himself. Though he was endowed with learning and wealth and charm, he was completely free of pride and arrogance, very humble, always undisturbed in the heart, always peaceful, no cravings for sense objects. He looked upon them as unreal. His senses, breath, body, intellect, everything was regulated. He had no desire. Therefore, very surprisingly, as we can see, all these qualities are the qualities of the greatest sage, and though he was born a demon, he had the qualities of a great sage, and therefore Narada says, it is no wonder that his glory is still sung today, because it is so rare for such a sagely quality to manifest in anyone, let alone a demon. Prahlada's greatness is like the greatness of Vasudeva himself, he says. Vasudeve Bhagavati Yasya Naisargiki Ratihi. Because his love for Vasudeva is so great that his glory is sung just as the glory of the Supreme Being himself is sung. That is why it is always said that the glory of the devotees is even greater than the glory of God, because the devotees bring forth devotion in the hearts towards God. So, Narada continues by saying that Prahlada, the way he lived as a child, some of the pastimes of Prahlada he describes beautifully. Narada says Prahlada was not an ordinary child at all. He was not interested in regular playthings like other children. He was only absorbed in the Lord all the time. It says, Krishna graha grihitatma na veda jagadidrisham. He was always devoted to Krishna, and therefore he acted as if he was possessed by Krishna. It said, sitting, walking, eating, drinking, lying down, speaking. He was never conscious of any of these acts. He was constantly held in the embrace of Lord Govinda. Again, these are all the qualities of a great bhakta, a great jnani. He was absolutely not conscious of the doings of his body. He was always situated in the eternal bliss of the self, pure being. Asinaha paryatan ashnan shayanaha prapiban bhuvan na anusandata etani govinda parirambitaha. He was always in the embrace of Govinda, the Supreme Lord, and not even aware of his bodily activities. And because of his ecstasy of devotion, it is said he would cry at sometimes, he would laugh at sometimes, he would see the vision of the Lord and cry out with loud shriek. He would dance, he would sometimes imitate the activities of the Lord. So these are all qualities which we will see later in the 10th skandha. The gopis demonstrate all the various ecstasies of devotion, and Prahlada here gives a glimpse into that. Such a great elevated devotee who had all these various moods, bhavas of devotion, sometimes in separation, sometimes in togetherness, sometimes crying, sometimes laughing, enraptured at the thought of Bhagavan, sitting mute sometimes, singing sometimes, eyes full of tears. So he was so devoted, such a glory to even read about Prahlad's devotional qualities and the symptoms of love he was manifesting. And by his devoted service, it is said that he brought supreme peace not only to himself, of course, but also the minds of all the friends of his, all the boys who were with him, who are normally miserable because of their demoniacal tendencies. So it is such an illustrious son that Prahlad was, and unfortunately, it is such an illustrious son that Hiranyakashipu wanted to harm. That's how Narada ends. He says, Tasmin Mahabhagavate Mahabhage Mahatmani Hiranyakashipu Rajan Akarod Aghamatmaje. So he says he's a Mahabhagavata, he's a great devotee, Mahabhage, greatly fortunate, Mahatmani, great soul. Such a being Prahlada was, and Hiranyakashipu wanted to commit harm to him who is also his son. So this is a great mystery now, and we have not, of course, one can get a hint because Hiranyakashipu hates the Lord and Prahlada loves the Lord, so there is naturally conflict. But yet there is the mystery of how Prahlada became such a great devotee, and also how Hiranyakashipu wanted to harm him, in what way. So this is asked by Yudhishthira. Yudhishthira asks Narada, who's listening, he's listening attentively to Narada. So he says, O sage, O Devarishi, we are very anxious to know why he wanted to inflict so much suffering on his own son. Because normally we do know that fathers tend to discipline their children if the children do something wrong, but they do not persecute them, they do not commit harm to them. This is for any child, and here we are talking of a special child who is so rare, like Prahlada. And having a son like Prahlada, why would Hiranyakashipu want to harm him and direct his hate towards him? So this is the mystery that Yudhishthira wants to resolve, and with this chapter ends. So in this chapter, we see beautifully how Prahlada's glory is given. Hiranyakashipu, of course, is the unrivaled emperor of the earthly and heavenly kingdom. He has so much opulence in him. He has got all the riches, and he has got this very clever boon, as we saw, by which he thinks he can never be vanquished, and he is literally intoxicated with power, and his senses are out of control. He is unleashing terror on all good beings. He is indulging in pleasure. So he is representing at the maximum some of the demoniacal tendencies. We see only a little bit here and there. And to such a being is very interestingly born the great soul Prahlada. And every description of Prahlada's devotion is so moving. As we see, he manifests all the great ecstatic symptoms of both devotion and wisdom. Supreme wisdom and supreme devotion in harmony is so rare, and it is found in the manifestation of Prahlada, where there are tears of love and yet complete indifference to all worldly activities, and no interest in play, no interest in regular mundane activities, but completely playing with the Lord within and without, having visions of Him, crying for Him, dancing with Him. This kind of devotion is so special to even read about. And so Prahlad manifests this devotion. And now, having got a wonderful glimpse into the devotional mood of Prahlad, now we will see going forward what was the reason Hiranyakashipu specifically wanted to even kill Prahlad. And Prahlad, how he taught everyone around on the glory of devotion and wisdom, and what eventually happens to Hiranyakashipu, who thought he is very clever in having this invincible boon. So, all this will be unfolded by Narada's response to the question of Yudhishthira in the coming chapters. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.